ZERG Hunter is a new archetype from the new mini set in the Great Dark Beyond with the Starcraft expansion. The idea behind the deck is you want to be going quite aggressively into your curve, and you want to overwhelm your opponent with a large amount of damage coming from cards such as Hydralisk, or getting a large amount of burst coming from Karrigan as well. The Sea Giants also add an extra element to the deck in which you can play an 8/8 for free once you've used some of your location spells and you've activated them. The goal that you want to be trying to do in the early game is you're wanting to get your spawning pool online so you're able to trade effectively using your minions. And then the other thing that you also want to consider as well is you want to be thinking about the using the Parrot Sanctuary effectively too, if you can. Because with Parrot Sanctuary, it makes your Zerglings free and you can just use it over and over for the turn, so you can use it the 3 times in total. So you could, in reality, play down the 2 sets of Zerglings and down the Hydralisk on turn 3, because of the fact that you can reduce down the cost of your each of your minions by 1 by using the Parrot Sanctuary. And then that also then makes your Sea Giant a lot cheaper as well, since you've been activating the location using that Parrot Sanctuary. The cards that you want to mulligan for in the deck is you want to mulligan for Spawning Pool, you want to mulligan for Bird Watching, you want to mulligan for sometimes the Titan Forge Traps, and you want to also mulligan for nydus Worm. Cards that are optional, like Sea Giant, also is quite good to have as well if you have some locations in your hand, because you're wanting to try and get that down as early as possible to try and overwhelm your opponent. If I was to make any changes to this deck, the list that's currently going to get put online, Evolution Chamber I found, especially running 2, isn't that useful. So I would cut that down to 1, and I would consider putting in a card such as Incindius or Glacial Shard or Mind Control Tech. If you're really wanting to be a bit crazy with it, you could put in ETC as well and put those into the pool for it. So going into the gameplay that's occurring right now, I'm playing against a Warlock, so it's using the deck out Warlock style. It also looks to play Giants down as well. I did end up taking the Evolution Chamber. I have the 1 mana 1 in my hand already, and I just grabbed the 2 mana 1 just in case I do need to go wide against them. This probably, I do need to make sure that I'm thinking about the amount of health that each of these minions have, because with Warlock they can deal 3 damage AoE quite easily using Table Flip. So that's something that I was also considering when I chose that Evolution Chamber, to try and make my other minions a bit bigger on the turn that I play Karrigan or something like that. Currently I'm sitting in not a extremely promising position, but you'll notice that I do play down the Parrot Sanctuary, which is going to be able to get all my minions activated out on the same turn, because I can use the buff over and over to get my different minions ready and active. I do have my access to my Hydralisk as well, but I'm going to use the tracking first since the Hydralisk is already a free card. And I'm just choosing out my card for the moment, which is going to be the bird watching, because I want to make sure that I'm thinking about if I can get the location online now, since I've just used the Parrot Sanctuary a few times. Because with the Parrot Sanctuary, when you've used it a few times, it does allow you to cheat out the Sea Giant. Which is obviously quite strong for you to make a bigger and bigger board for them to deal with. At the moment, I'm just deciding what the best way to go about it is, because I could play down the Evolution Chamber, which would buff up my Zerglings. But with that being said, it doesn't establish as much tempo or pressure to the opponent. So I ended up opting to play down the Hydralisk. Either way would have been fine. Something that I would have changed from the previous turn, though, is I wouldn't have chose the Evolution Chamber, because ultimately you only need 1, and this was one of the first times that I was using the deck, so I was thinking that obviously getting a wide board and going buff would be quite strong, but with that being said, it does get a bit weaker when you have 2 in your hand and you're not really able to use them quite efficiently or effectively. So they end up getting their spawning pool down onto the board, and they've just also done the proc, so they can get the rush minions for it, and this has allowed them to get a clear board going into that turn. So even if I had done the buff, I more than likely wouldn't have survived that turn. I do just play down the Karrigan here because obviously it's the safest play. Spawning Pool would be relatively decent as well, but Karrigan does clear the board and it gets me the two 2/5s onto the board as well. This can allow you to get cards such as Viper or Infestor to be able to buff up your minions even more, or add the Reborn effect to your minions. They end up using Domino effect, so it does obviously reduce down the health of my minions, and then they're going to use the Cavern and then Horizon's Edge. They are hoping to be able to take out my minions there, and they're obviously hoping to take out both of them. I do get a little bit of extra value coming from that, and I do have a double Infestor coming from those minions. So Infest is one of the best new cards for Zerg, especially because it allows you to get that big buff onto your minions that remains for the entire game for the Zergs. And right now I'm just considering what my best choice is, because obviously with the old Aggro Discover deck, you used to be able to use Observer of Myths to go wide, and to allow you to get a decent sized board for it. I do just play down the Evolution Chamber and use my Ravage because I'm trying to deal more damage to my opponent's face, and it does apply obviously some more pressure to them. Going into their turn next turn, if they don't have Karrigan or a way to AoE this board, I am sitting in a very decent position. So I did opt just for that sort of choice, but it is quite likely they would have an AoE. They end up deciding to use Symphony of Sins, so they do need to look for the deal 6 damage to all characters, otherwise the game would be over. But with them dealing 6 damage to their entire board, it does mean that they are getting quite low in health total. They usually consume as well onto their location, which does heal them. And I've got a Viper as well, so that's one of the stronger cards to be getting through the lavas, because Viper ultimately is probably one of the strongest cards to be adding into the new set. I end up getting some Zerglings, and they do have some buffs put onto them already, because the Infestor that ended up getting taken out gives an extra buff, and the one that came out of my deck was being used with the bird watching, so it does make them a bit bigger. And then right now I'm just opting to decide for how I'm going to play the next turn. Something that I could have done that turn is I could have used the Observer of Myths, which could have possibly been a decent play in terms of that was there. It does obviously mean that I could go a little bit wider, but with me having 6/4s onto the board now, they will be able to use the AoE coming from the location, but it is something that's not too dangerous, since they weren't able to use a table flip or their Karrigan last turn when it would have been exactly the same sort of situation. They do play down an ETC now, so quite often ETC is going to be getting a card such as like Mind Control Tech or something that gives a little bit of armor. And then they end up just putting, I think it's going to be a domino effect. No, it's reverberation, so it is able to then trade into my 6/4 that's here. And that obviously can get cleared then using the Cavern, because it's taking the extra 1 damage that's there. They end up then trading into those minions and then just sending the rest of the damage face, which does allow them to get into a decent position. I do have another spawning pool that I can use, and it would allow me to get the rush condition. I play down Grifter here because of the fact that with either the damage one or the take control of an enemy minion one, I would win, but I end up obviously whiffing a little bit on that. But with that being said, with the Tidepool Hunter, I do have an Evolution Chamber in my pool, so I can just play down the Evolution and then just go face with it, because it gives the extra 2 attack buff to those minions. So yeah, that's end up being the clear for it. So it was a little bit scrappy that game, but the fact they didn't have a table flip or any other AoE besides from Symphony of Sins really did help with my damage, or with my game plan. Going into against Priest, it's quite similar. So Priest is in general going to be quite slow going into your thing, so you do want to make sure that for your Mulligan that you are going for spawning pool at least. I did keep tracking and Zergling here. In other decks lists of ZERG Hunter, you'll find that they do drop the Zergling, because in reality it's just a 1 cost card. You can get away with using just the spawning pool to be able to get your Zerglings, and then the other different ones are in general better. The 2/5 that gives you a lava is better. The yeah, that sort of idea does give you a bit of a benefit. I get here the parrot sanctuary, and I just use the proc. I just hold for that turn because next turn when I go into it, I'm going to be able to summon all of those minions that are in my hand. I could also use the nydus worm as well if I want to, but going wide into this board and going hard into this board is in general going to be a better payoff for me. So I do use the proc of the I do use the proc of the spawning pool here, and then I play down my other Zerglings. Obviously, if I had Evolution Chamber, this would be extremely strong going into this turn, but having the fact that the Hydralisk is going to be able to deal the board with the Parrot Sanctuary here, it means that a lot of the damage is going to go face, and a lot of the damage is going to stick onto those minions. The thing that would be very good in this hand as well is the Giant, because I would have the Giant for free this turn if I ended up drawing into it, obviously, because I've used the 3 Parrot Sanctuaries and then the 2 Spawning Pool procs. They played on another Sanctuary, so it's not too much of a concern for me considering my hand. I have a few options that I can go for. I can either use the Worm, or I could use the Tracking. I end up deciding to use the Worm, but it probably was better just going for the Tracking first in that situation, because it would allow me to get cards such as, obviously the Evolution Chamber that you'll see there, or it could have got me something that would be able to completely clear this board that they have, and it would allow me to obviously deal some more damage into the opponent. They, with my 6 of the Zerglings here as well, I've got the Evolution Chamber and I've got the next Hydralisk as well, which is going to be really strong going into next turn to be able to beat them, with sitting with the 15, the extra damage that comes from it. They do end up playing down their Void Rays, which can obviously deal with my minions that are here too. It wouldn't have mattered if I had the Evolution Chamber, but it is fine too because I do have that particular play. I end up drawing my sea giant too, my seaside giant too, which is obviously quite useful to be able to use into these minions that are here. And then it will allow me to get obviously a big buff in terms of being able to play down my 8 damage minion, my 8 power minion into them. I choose the Grifter here just because of the fact that if I need to deal some extra burst damage, it will be able to deal with them and deal some face proc to them. Right here I choose the Alien Encounters as well, since I've already got quite a decent sized board and I'm just wanting to hold a little bit. I end up just using my Hydralisk as well in my Evolution Chamber, just so then I can deal some more pressure towards them. And I just go all face into them as well because I can use the Karrigan next turn to be able to get the lethal applied to them. Yeah, but it basically puts them on the clock for the next turn. As I finish this game, if you are enjoying the content, please like and subscribe. I really do appreciate the support. Okay, so going into the next game, we're playing against a rogue. This rogue potentially could be a weapon rogue because I think I've played against this one before I played this, and I was assuming that it was a weapon rogue. So I made sure that I just kept the spawning pool, obviously, and I'm just deciding whether to keep the Sea Giant and the Trident Forge traps. This spawning pool is always a keep here, but I do end up mulliganing away the Titan Forge traps, and I'm just thinking that the Sea Giant would be relatively decent as well if in this situation as well, if I do end up getting into another location to be able to play easily. So if I did a tracking next turn, I'd be looking for something like the Parrot Sanctuary, so I'd be able to get the procs off quite easily to get the big giant online. I end up getting an Alien Encounters here as well, which is quite useful, especially with the tracking that I have. And I do have a Birdwatching and a Karrigan. Actually, it is... I think that I hadn't played against this opponent just yet when I was playing against them, so I end up just playing my Zergling and I choose my Niall. If I hadn't known it was against a weapon rogue, I would have been playing I would have grabbed the Birdwatching more than likely, because Birdwatching obviously does the same thing that I would need to reduce down the Alien Encounters and then still apply some pressure to them. So I do play down the Niall here, and I end up just passing the turn over to them. Next turn we'll be more than likely just playing the Alien Encounters down. The idea of me playing down the Niall here, obviously, at this point in time, I didn't know that they were a weapon rogue, and I was just playing, I ended up just playing the Niall because they weren't applying too much pressure at that point in time. They end up attaching to their weapon and they put it with the 5 attack power, and they've got the 2 now 2 durability. So what I need to be thinking of when I'm going here now is I need to be making sure that I'm considering the amount of spells that I'm using. I'm also considering the how I can get alien encounters online to be able to deal with the opponent. I choose Hidden Meaning here because it's going to be in general one of the stronger spells to be using, and Ice Trap as well, because Explosive Trap isn't very useful going into into the weapon, because it just deals 2 damage to their face essentially. It's not going to be clearing anything. Rat Trap, they could potentially be useful, but it didn't end up obviously showing up. And then also applying the secrets here and then using Valera's Gift is obviously it shows to me that they could potentially Fan of Knives as well. So I need to be making sure that my Zerglings are at least 2 health if I'm going to watch out for the Fan of Knives play they potentially could have. Them using all their mana there also procs my Hidden Meaning. So my Hidden Meaning then obviously gets a little bit more power onto the board to be able to deal with whatever they have. And I'm just here deciding what I'm going to do, but I end up it's a tough choice because of the Grifter can obviously apply the heal, which is ultimately what I end up deciding to get. Because if you use Grifter, you can make it so then your health can go up with the extra 12 health, or it can apply extra burst to your opponent. I ended up just going wide on the board with the alien encounters too, because if they do use the Valera's Gift, they'd also need to have the Tarslick as well to be able to deal with this board, and I'm just assuming that they don't have it because of the fact that they have used the Valera's Gift, so it will be a 2 mana, and then Fan of Knives will be 2 mana, and they wouldn't end up getting everything. They would still be missing a few different minions too, so that's ultimately the reason why I decided and opted for this play. Because, without them being able to clear the board, it does apply a lot of pressure to them by having this sort of amount of damage that's here. You'll notice also that I was counting how much damage that I had on board as well, because it's important to be keeping track of how much damage you've got, in case so you don't miss out on the lethal opportunity. And it's better to do it during your opponent's turn rather than your own turn, because if you do it during your own turn, it's possible that you may end up making a mistake, you may feel rushed, you may just miss the opportunity. So it's important that you are applying your thoughts in your turn and your opponent's turn to be considering the options of what you have. Going into a Shaman matchup, so I need to be making sure that I'm considering my options for Starship Shaman, because that's obviously the most powerful of the Shaman list. I end up doing a full Mulligan here because I didn't have the location for the Seaside Giant. It possibly was a potential keep for the Seaside Giant in the situation as well, but I did obviously get rid of it. And this hand is also showing me another reason why I didn't particularly like the Evolution Chamber sort of idea. I'm not the biggest supporter of that. I end up just buffing my Titanforge traps just so I can prepare for next turn, but also it allows to get more Discovers into the pool for my alien encounters if I need to be using it. Going into next turn, I just do play down the Niall, because they aren't really threatening too much at the moment, and then the Niall also can get tracking to allow for alien encounters set up and also other minion setup that I need to be doing. Using the Trusty Companion here isn't too much of a threatening spot for me, but obviously with the Murlocs I ended up using as well, it does mean that they can clear my Niall. But I'm sitting in a relatively decent position considering that I do have the tracking here. I end up playing down my Scout and my secrets because I do want to get extra value coming from it. I choose the bait and switch simply because it allows me to deal somewhat into this board, because it means that they'll need to use at least 2 of their minions, and potentially they may not use a minion that they'd really want to. And I choose that Alien Encounters here because not only will I end up getting a second one, but also because the other 2 ones wouldn't be particularly useful considering the board position that I'm in. By trading in their Murloc, they obviously activate the bait and switch, which then shows them that they'll need to use SCV to be able to trade into it too. But they end up using the pop-up book, which does obviously do the same sort of thing, and then they can use another, a different clear rather than the SCV. But it doesn't really mean too much. For the backstage bouncer in that situation, you'd always go the far right, you don't go into the middle one. So they should have done the backstage bouncer onto the right-hand side rather than the left-hand side, but that's just a small mistake for them. I don't think it really matters in this matchup either, because I don't have any or many ways to be able to deal damage to their wide board, unless I ended up getting something through the the one of the lava's got the Mutalisk, but it's ultimately a pretty... I don't really care too much for that card. Usually I won't even end up choosing it. So I end up grabbing the spawning pool here, and I play down my Observer of Myths. This obviously is useful with alien encounters, and right now I'm just deciding whether to use the second alien encounters. It, in general, is probably better just holding it, and I did end up holding it just because of the fact that I do have the Evolution Chamber in my hand, which I'd be able to use to buff all of my minions, and it would end up obviously applying more pressure to the opponent by having the extra proc going onto a wider board that's there. And then, having if they had a way to clear, it would also be a bigger concern considering I'd be using up both of my buffs. I chose the Zergling there because it applies the buff to my Zergling that I got from this spawning pool, and it will be useful, especially going into this the spawning pool turn that I have next turn. And I'm just deciding right now what my best play is going to be, because obviously I don't have the spawning pool minions to have rush right now. I end up summoning the Zerglings, and then I play the alien encounters. It should have been the opposite way round, because the alien encounters wouldn't have given the buff to the minion, but they would have been buffed the other way. So it was definitely better using my alien encounters first and then playing down the Zerglings, but it's just this little misplay that is something that you need to be considering in your options, because it would have allowed my alien encounter minions to have 5 attack rather than 3 at the moment. The 3 attack does clear with whatever they have currently, but it is still a misplay that you need to consider. They use their delicious cheese and then obviously end up winning because they can't really deal with the board that's there. But yeah, if you're enjoying the content, please like and subscribe, and bye for now.